Dwemer Inquieries, Volume 1, Their Architecture and Civilization by Dwemer Scholar. It has been my life's work to investigate the Dwemer, their dubious history and mysterious vanishment. My goal with this text is to share my findings and conclusions based on 80 years spent studying their unique architectural remains. The migration of the Deep Elves from their ancestral Dwemereth, now Morrowind, it's a generally accepted fact. Recorded history supports this, specifically mentioning the Rourken clan's refusal to join King Dumak in the forming of the First Council, and their subsequent exodus to Hammerfell. The architectural premise is also sound, as the building habits of the dwarves adapted and changed, albeit slowly and in subtle ways, over time and land. I propose that some of these differences are stylistic as well as practical. Traditional viewpoints suggest that the Vvardenfell Dwemer were the most prolific of their kind. Based on my excavations throughout Skyrim, Morrowind, and High Rock, I am not sure that this is the case. While Vvardenfell is almost cluttered with dwarven ruins, poking through the surface of the landscape, the construction of those ruins is fundamentally different from the majority of what I have observed elsewhere. Further, as we delve into Vvardenfell ruins, we notice that their internal structure is quite different. While major civic and operational chambers are found near the surface in a Vvardenfell ruin, that is not typically the case on the mainland. Minor passageways and storehouse rooms are near the surface, but more important locations don't occur until we explore much deeper. Because such major locations are well hidden in Dwemer ruins outside of Morrowind, many scholars believe that they were in fact not present in ruins outside that province. This premature conclusion led some to believe such sites to be mere outposts. My research has shown this is not to be the case. There are a few theories that may explain this difference. Perhaps clan architects simply had their own styles and preferences when it came to civic planning. This seems only somewhat likely. As dwarven techniques were based on empirical study, there was likely little room for creative interpretation when it came to building technique. Geological makeup of the terrain almost certainly played a role, especially in a region like northern Skyrim, where the ground near the surface is very rocky and often frozen, versus the volcanic substratum common in Vvardenfell or the ubiquitous aquifers found in Hammerfell. It's possible that dwarven architects in the north were not even able to excavate larger structures until reaching more pliable stratum. This scholar would like to suggest, however, that many structures west of Morrowind were built after the First Era, year 420. When the clan Rourken left Vvardenfell, it seems evident that several clans broke off to create their own settlements and chose to live in greater isolation than their eastern brethren. This theory is particularly fascinating because it leads me to believe that dwarven architects may have developed even more elaborate methods of hiding their strongholds over time. This opens the distinct possibility that undisturbed dwarven archaeological sites exist throughout Tamriel, even in southern areas like Cyrodiil or Black Marsh, where dwarves are not believed to have ever had a significant presence. Though we ought not to get carried away on flights of fancy, one would extrapolate this logic to suggest that some dwarven clans were living among us for much longer than previously believed, perhaps well beyond the disappearance during the War of the Red Mountain in the First Era, 700. Dwemer Inquieries, Volume 2, Their Architecture and Civilization by Dwemer Scholar. The limited written record supports that the perception of the Deep Elves as culturally revering the pursuits of logic and science. This stands in stark contrast to the belief system of most other Mer cultures. When we imagine a society structured around such a central ideology, it seems reasonable that prolific scholars, especially in fields such as mathematics, metallurgy, or architecture, would be elevated to social status like that of clergy in a more mystically inclined culture. The idea is supported by a fragment of Dwemer's text recovered from a colony in SKYRIM, Irkenthand, which I believe to be associated with the clan Rourken, the original Dwemeris, and my translation follow. Therese granted cousin Quoleg of privilege with duties for family home building, Hogan Kultora tradition, to Father Mundus Shaper. Some scholars interpret this as evidence of Dwemer worship of Mundus, but I do not agree. My translation of this passage suggests that a respected Dwemer by the name of Quoleg was promoted to a civic position, probably tonal architect. The later half of the fragment suggests that Quoleg's position requires him to build in a specific style. The term Hogan Kultora has thus far eluded me, but I believe it may be the name of such a style. It's possible there were several styles, differing from their construction principles and typical structures. One earmark of what I believe was the prevalent Dwemer style among northern clans was a feature I call the deep venue. Deep venues are often characterized as being made up of one or more expansive natural caverns in which several other structures will occur. Structures within the venue may be carved from stone itself, or freely erected upon the cavern floor. The largest and most impressive venues, such as that found in Bathardams, may even feature roads wide enough for large dead men to walk shoulder-mid-shoulder along it. Arcanexes are typically smaller structures. Very few have been properly studied before disruption by grave robbers or greedy adventurers, but those few undisturbed sites have contained a surprising collection of magical objects, such as soul gems, alchemical concoctions, and magical texts. Some scholars take this as evidence that the Dwemer did, in fact, dabble in the magical arts. Based on what we know of their culture, as well as the fact that most arcanexes are minor structures compared to other common fixtures, I would suggest that these were centers of study and nothing more. Perhaps the dwarves established these halls as a means to study men and mer, who surely seemed as alien to them as the Dwemer seem to us today. Great animoculturists can be found in many dwarven strongholds. These were the factories where the centurions and various other constructs were built. I have hoped to study these chambers for clues as to the means by which those mysterious automata are given life, but those same guardians make these especially difficult and dangerous areas to explore. Dwemer Inquieries, Volume 3, Their Architecture and Civilization by Thelwe Ghislaine, Scholar. My studies and this text have focused heavily on the fact that Dwemer archaeological sites west of Ardenfell seem to be built at much greater depths than their counterparts near the Red Mountain. I believe there was a specific threshold to which the Dwarven excavators would dig before the construction of vital structures would begin. I have referred to this threshold as the geocline, but I have found that often be redundant with the deep venue of a colony. Still, there is some variation in the actual depth of a deep venue, whereas the geocline is always the marker where I reason the city proper begins. Tunnels and chambers at more shallow depths, while underground in their architectural style, appear to have served little in the way of critical civic purpose. Slurpus stores of food, warehouse chambers that may have been used in trading with nearby surface settlements, or barracks for topside patrols are common above the geocline. These tunnels, I have observed, can meander in a seemingly more random pattern than those planned structures beneath. I hypothesize that this may be due to the unpredictable nature of excavation, even to a race as clever as the Dwemer. Surely unexpected deposits of stone or geological events could make the effort difficult, and I think that these haphazard tunnels are often the result of the search for suitable substratum to build within. I have found in small number of ruins reference to a geological anomaly or place known as. This is intriguing, because the term not only appears in a few tablet fragments, but very specifically on ornate metal frames, in the deepest reaches of the strongholds Alfdand, Irkunthand, and Mzinjaleft of SKYRIM. I have yet to decipher the meaning of these elaborate carvings, but consider it highly strange that they occur in the deepest part of each of these ruins. Risen by order, cousin of privileged Quolek of Schezilin, privileged duties. Clan home building Hogan Kultorra, tradition of Hail World Shaper. The most reasonable translation of I have managed to decipher is Blackest Kingdom Reaches, but I cannot imagine what that means. I suspect there may be some pattern I'm failing to notice. This creeping doubt has haunted my career in recent years, and I have begun to doubt if I will unravel some grand secret of the dwarves in my lifetime, though it lies just under my nose, or indeed under my feet. Dwarves, the Lost Race of Tambriel, Volume 1, Architecture and Designs by Calcelmo Scolaromarca. Let me begin by correcting a common misconception. The proper term to use when referencing the ancient lost race of Tambriel is Dwemer. It is a word whose meaning is roughly translated to people of the deep in the common tongue, and whose use has been widely replaced by the more ubiquitous nomenclature, dwarves. I would like stated that I use the name dwarves in lieu of the more accurate term in these books out of sympathy for my readership, whom I can safely assume does not have the breadth of scholarship that 200 years of study has given me. With that small point finished, let us begin our discussion of the dwarves by focusing on the indisputable artifacts they have left behind, their architectural and cultural designs. Unlike the more controversial areas of dwarven scholarship, the construction of dwarven cities and relics are well founded due to the plethora of samples taken from the ruins these people may have left behind. My own home city, Markarth, was originally one such ruin, and I can state from first-hand experience that all dwarven designs share a set of common principles that we can use to determine true artifacts from fakes and delineate patterns and methodologies that were important to their craftsmen. First of all, we can say for certain that dwarven artisans favored stones, at least as far as their buildings were concerned. This is no surprise. With notable exceptions, the vast majority of dwarven architecture is found on the ground or carved out of mountains. It is possible, although only theoretically, that the dwarves first mastered masonry as a race quite early, and later examples of metalwork were added onto much earlier stone designs as the dwarves began to master more complex tools. Regardless, the foundation of all known dwarven ruins is built on stonework, and the structure of dwarven stonework is sharp, angular, and intensely mathematical in nature. By a simple count, there are hundreds if not thousands of samples of dwarven buildings made of precise square shapes, and far fewer examples of discretely rounded or curved stonework, leading us to believe that the early dwarves favored trusted, well-calculated designs based on angled lines rather than riskier, more imprecise calculations based on arcs and curves. This comparatively simple tradition of stone cutting has nevertheless resulted in buildings that are as structurally sound today as they were thousands of years ago, making the works of our most skilled masons today seem like child's play in comparison. Metalwork, as far as we know, is the primary method used to make almost all dwarven crafts. We cannot, however, discount more easily destructive materials such as clay, paper, and glass from outside the scope of dwarven craftsmanship, but given the tendency of dwarven design to favor the long-lasting over the fragile, We can safely assume that the very least metal was a heavy preference, and the metal used in all so far discovered Dwarven relics is entirely unique to their culture. No other race has replicated how whatever process was used to create Dwarven metal, although it can be easily mistaken for bronze, and in fact many forgers of Dwarven materials use bronze to create their fake replicas. It is most definitely a distinct type of metal on its own. I have personally seen metallurgists attempt to combine several different types of steel and common and rare ores in order to imitate Dwarven metal's exclusive properties. The only method that has been successful is to melt down existing Dwarven metallic scraps and start over from there. Dwarves, The Lost Race of Tamriel, Volume 2, Weapons, Armor and Machines by Anselmo, Scholar of Margath. In our previous discussion on the Dwarves, or Dwemer, in the more correct scholarly terminology, we looked into the properties of Dwarven architecture and metallic crafts. In this continuing discussion of Tamriel's Lost Race, we shall examine the ways in which Dwarves waged war and kept out trespassers. Unlike many other cultures still existing today, the Dwarves built and relied on increasingly complicated machines for a wide variety of martial tasks, and weapons and armor created slowly for the purpose of being wielded by Dwarven warriors, show remarkably fewer points of progress beyond the basic designs. Let us begin by analyzing those basic weapons and armors. Anyone who has held a Dwarven axe or worn a Dwarven helmet can testify as to the ancient, everlasting quality of Dwarven craftsmanship. Weapons do not deviate too greatly from their base function. Dwarven swords pierce through light armors with incredible effectiveness, owing primarily to the remarkable sharpness of tempered Dwarven metal, and owing to a far lesser extent to its simple, double-edged design. Compare and contrast a sharp, angular Dwarven dagger to a curved elven blade. It becomes a small logical leap to say that Dwarven weaponsmiths relied almost exclusively on creating quality materials first, and merely allow the form of those materials to flow from the method that weapon was intended to kill people. As a culture that built almost exclusively underground, it's no surprise that Dwarven armors are built to withstand incredibly heavy blows. Again, the fact that they are also resistant to being pierced by arrows or small blades is more of a testament to superior Dwarven metallurgy over superior Dwarven armorsmithing, but it would be erroneous to thus conclude that Dwarven smiths did not take the manufacture of their weapons and armor very seriously. Every piece of warcraft I have examined show a remarkable amount of necessary detailing and personalization that is just as evident today among the most ardent blacksmiths. A Dwarven smith probably came from a long tradition that distinguished itself in way that, say, the grip of a mace would feel, or the design of the head of individual arrows, although, due to the paltry lack of any cultural artifacts outside the weapons and armors themselves, this is only mere speculation. The last but probably most important discussion in this volume pertains to the existence of Dwarven machinery. Dwarves created and manufactured on a very broad scale thousands of mechanical apparatuses of varying complexity, the most simple of which is the standard arachnid design used to ward off trespassers. We are so far uncertain as to how the Dwarves were able to bring to life these remarkably intelligent machines, but I have witnessed one stalk a highly trained thief for several hours, only to ambush him as he was dealing with a log to some room or treasure trove. I admit to have forgotten the details past the point at which he began spouting lightning at him. Dwarven military machines also range from the human-sized spear warrior, which patrols the interiors of the ruins as a harmless ball, only to emerge from it as a fully armed and armored automaton fighter, to the justly feared centurion, whose height ranges from twice to several hundred times human size, depending on which reports you believe. Dwarves, The Lost Race of Tamriel, Volume 3, Culture and History, by Calcelmo Scholar of Markarth. In this final volume on our discussion on the dwarves, again, see the term Dwemer for references using the more scholastic name. We will attempt an explanation into the distinct culture and history of Tamriel's lost race. We must, however, begin such a discussion with a warning, despite that certain academic circles would like people to believe. There is so far no evidence that verifies any claim as to the dwarves' particular customs, morals, myths, legends, laws, system of governance, or involvement in major historical events, outside of those few examples that remain indisputable. For instance, while we can say with absolute certainty that the disappearance of the entire Dwemer race happened very suddenly, only the laziest of junior scholars would say that this event happened the same day or even the same hour. There is simply no proof to dispute the theory that perhaps dwarves disappeared from Tamriel gradually over the course of several years, or indeed several decades. There is nothing that disproves the source of this disappearance as being attributable to mass deaths, plagues, magical contamination, experiments into the nature of Aetherius gone wrong, or even race-wide teleportation into one of the planes of oblivion. There is simply too little that the dwarves left behind to point to the nature of their great vanishing act, and this same frustration applies to all aspects of their social structure and history. What we know then can only be inferred by the writings of other races which made contact with the dwarves before they left Tamriel. The Dark Elves, Dunmer, for example, teach that their great prophet Nerevar helped unite the dwarves and the elves in Morrowind against occupying North's armies from the SKYRIM in the First Era, but Northern Orc writings also indicate that the dwarves were also allied with them at various points and in various legendary battles of theirs. Unfortunately, none of these legends and folklore make an effort to describe the dwarves in great detail, only that they were a secretive people and that an alliance with them was unusual enough to warrant crafting a story around. And past the First Era, no race makes note of encountering any living dwarves at all. This is further confounded by the fact that so many of the Dark Elven writings of their relationship with the dwarves were lost during the tragic eruptions of Bardenfell during the Oblivion Crisis, nearly 200 years ago. What secrets they could have revealed about the lost race are now buried behind layers of molten earth, along with so many unfortunate Dark Elven people. Thus, we conclude our discussion on the dwarves on a somber note. As with all scholarly endeavors, we are left with more questions than we have answers, and the proof we so desperately search for, it's so often out of reach, denied, even to the most fervent effort. The mysteries the dwarves have left us with could easily warrant another century or so worth of personal examination for me, and quite possibly even several millennia of excavation of even one Dwarven ruin would be insufficient to paint a complete picture on them. But what we can see from our threadbare tapestry of Dwarven artifacts is a careful, intelligent, industrious, and highly advanced culture whose secrets we, as students and teachers of their works, can only hope to uncover someday.